Every system in football has its weaknesses, and this is the main weakness of Ange ball: the amount of space that is left in the wide channels when Spurs attack, leaving them vulnerable to counterattacks in defensive transition. Today we will be exploring 1. Why do Spurs leave spaces in their wide channels? 2. Why is leaving spaces out wide an issue? 3. Which players in the current squad help us combat this issue? 4. What tweaks Ange could make to help us combat this in certain situations? And 5. Would Ange ever use a back 3 in certain games? But before this, please subscribe if you are new. Please also comment and tell us what or who you'd like us to analyse next. Please also like and share the video to help us get this video seen by more people. But without further ado, let's get into this. So we are all aware that Ange sets up in possession in a 2-3-5 shape, with the 2 centre-backs, 2 inverted fullbacks with a number 6, and then a front 5 with 2 advanced midfielders pushing into that front line. At times you'll also see one of the fullbacks joining the front 5, sometimes being covered by one of the midfielders, or sometimes that fullback even creating a front 6. This therefore means spaces are left in the back line, primarily being those spaces of the wide channels, with the 2 centre-backs being responsible often for defending large spaces out wide. However, Spurs can be incredibly vulnerable if they lose the ball while having possession. If the opposition can launch quick counter-attacks when they win the ball, then Spurs don't have the players to cover those spaces in time, which means our centre-backs get pulled out wide and often have to delay opposition wingers before players get back and cover. However, a top counter-attacking team can utilise this space efficiently and create effective chances in the transitions. Porro and Udogie have incredible engines, which I think is such a major part of their roles. At times you see them receive the ball in the number 10 positions, so whenever there is a turnover they are required to make huge sprints to cover their traditional fullback positions. Although their stamina is brilliant, no player can realistically get back in time consistently to defend those wide channels, which is why it is so important for our centre-backs to be able to defend those areas. Despite this though, they are only human, and can be overwhelmed with multiple opponents making runs on the counter. Van der Ven's pace helps us clean up those transitions especially, where we often see him sweep in and clear the ball before we are under threat. Another player who really helps us here is Sarr, who has the legs to run the length of the pitch to help cover these spaces. There's a few minor tweaks I feel like Ange may look to make over time in certain games. If for example we play against an elite transitional team in Champions League knockouts, he may look to manage this. I think the obvious tweak here is rather than using a 2-3 in possession shape for the back 5, to switch it to a 3-2 shape, meaning rather than pushing into midfield, one of the fullbacks sits as a third centre-back in rest defence. Rest defence is the shape your defence sits in while your team attacks, if you didn't know. I could see Van der Ven thriving as a left-back here, with Romero and Dragusin as the 2 centre-backs on paper. Van der Ven could help circulate the ball from deep in possession with his excellent carrying and decent passing, while Romero could defend the space left by Porro with more cover behind him by Dragusin and Van der Ven. This therefore would look like a back 4 when in settled defensive shape, but in possession it would be a back 3 with Porro still advancing as he usually would. This is the only way I see Ange ever moving to a type of back 3. If he were to move to a traditional back 3, like some have been suggesting, with pure wingbacks providing the width, I feel he loses a lot of the foundations he's built the system on so far. He loses the ability to create isolated 1v1 opportunities for the wingers, as our widest players will be starting much deeper, being the wingbacks. He also loses the ability for the number 6 to consistently play bounce passes with the centre-backs, or to flick it around the corner to our inverted fullbacks, which is a huge facet of how we look to build up. I'm not saying he couldn't design alternative build-up patterns which suit his philosophy with the traditional back 3 shape. I just personally feel he is wedded to having a lone pivot being important in build-up, and players who stay high and wide to stretch back 4s. But it's certainly something to keep an eye on in the future. Ange has built such an amazing system in such a short time, and these concerns actually don't worry me long term. I feel like he is currently building the foundations of his system, and once the squad develops further, he will look to those finer details and margins on how he can push us that bit further to hopefully compete for trophies.